Okay, so this is an abbreviated version of the shiur that I gave last night to the women. I'll tell you how I'm going to abbreviate it. The title of the shiur is my current radical ? View on the mitzvah of drinking on Purim. All right, the way I'm going to abbreviate it is that last night I went over all the sources inside, I'm only going to do it outside, and that'll cut out a lot of time. Also, I don't like to give lecture style shiurim, but I think in order for time, then we'll keep it that way. Okay. So as you can see, my 6 preparatory points. So Avital Hafser gets the credit for prompting me to do the shiur. I am really against extremist stances on drinking on Purim. I think there are a lot of people who are either like, oh, all for it or all against it. I'm really against people who say that there's no chiyuv or mitzvah to drink on Purim. That's just false, right? If you look at any of the sources, you see it's false. And I was shocked to see this statement from a Rav from our yeshiva say in a public article, let's be clear and unequivocal, it is inappropriate for anyone to get drunk on Purim, period. I think that is just a total misrepresentation of the actual halacha, but the position is going to be nuanced, okay, that we're going to see. Also, this approach aims to explain traditional sources, but there's one very non-traditional source, which is the kind of impetus for the entire thing. 4, this is a theory in progress, not a definitive conclusion. Okay, so if anyone quotes this by saying Rabbi Schneeweiss holds XYZ, then I'll track you down. All right, and this is not psak. We're not even going to psak, and also we're going to try to avoid social commentary. So for those who missed the vote won that we're doing a truncated version of the shiur I gave last night on my current radical view of drinking on Purim. Okay, but so so I think we're all familiar with the Gemara. Okay, the Gemara basically says, okay, that you're obligated to get drunk on Purim until you don't know the difference between Avraham and Baruch Mordechai. Again, this is a truncated version, so I'm just going to summarize this outside. Rashi says levasume means to get drunk on wine. Okay, and everyone says that levasume means to get drunk or to get drunk on wine or to be intoxicated. Okay, no one says it means anything else. Okay, no one that I've ever found, ever. Okay, right after that story, you have the incident of Rabba and Rabbi Zera, where they had a Purim meal together. They both got drunk. Rabba shechted Rabbi Zera, which Avram ben Ramam says means he wounded him really badly. Miri says it means he gave him a squeeze because it should be sachte, and he was injured, and then Rabba davened for him, and then he got revived, and he invited him the next year, and he said, no, we don't get a miracle every year. Okay, so that's the Gemara. All right. And if you were to read this, you would think that it means you have to get drunk to the point where you don't know the difference between Avraham and Baruch Mordechai, right? Which we call blackout drunk. Okay, so I wanted to do in the actual shiur, I did a survey. I wanted to do a survey of the variety of opinions. We're not going to do all of them, but I divided them into 4 groups. The first group is group 0 because no one's in the group. Okay, which is that you get blackout drunk. Okay, no one holds this, and the reason why no one holds this is because there's a halachic category called shikrus or sholot. Okay, which the Rambam defines as in Hilchos. I'm not even going to say the sources, okay, because this is a truncated version. All the Marmakomos are in the thing. Hashikar she'eno oseh, she'oseh ve'eno yodea ma yaseh. So the guy who is so drunk that he doesn't even know what he's doing, ein ma'asav klum, his actions don't even register. V'harihu kashote o kakatim pagos ben sheish. He's like a imbecile, or like someone who's like a being 6-year-old kid. And the halacha is you're ein kan chiyuv. You're out of eno chayav al kol avera shiaseh ein kan chiyuv. You're not in the realm of mitzvos. Okay, so you cannot say that there is a mitzvah that requires you to exempt yourself from mitzvos. That just can't be, and that's why no one says it, okay? Aside from the fact that it's dangerous to get that drunk, okay? Fine. So then you got group 1. Broadly speaking, group 1 is people who are for, okay? And the way I organize this is I quoted 4 Mefarshim or poskim in each group, okay? So here you have the Rif, who just brings down the statement of the Gemara and just says, you have to get drunk until you don't know the difference. You have the Rambam, who we're going to read inside because that's the one we're going to focus on. Ketzad chovasuda zo shiochal basar v'yisakin suda naya kfi asher timsa yada v'shosei yain ad sheyishtaker v'yiradim b'shikrus. You drink wine at the meal until you get drunk and fall into a deep sleep in drunkenness. And the reason why I'm articulating that is because there are people who will quote the Rambam as saying that you drink and then take a nap. Okay, those people are either mistaken or lying, and I've seen both, right? They're mistaken because the Ramah holds that that's what you do, and people misattribute that to the Rambam. And the Ramah does not use the word tardema, nor does he use the word drunkenness. And I think in the standard editions of the Ramah, it says Rambam. Okay, I don't know if the Ramah wrote those parenthetical comments, but people misattributed this to the Rambam. Rambam says you get drunk, and he says it twice. Okay, and there are people who lie, who know that this is not what the Rambam says, and they still attribute it to the Rambam anyway. Okay, so be on guard against lying and mistakenness. The Rambam says you get drunk and fall into a deep sleep from drunkenness. I've heard people also say that the Rambam says, yeah, this means you get blackout drunk. That's not what tardema means. Tardema means a deep sleep. Okay, when shofar calls you to wake up from your tardema, it doesn't mean from your blackout drunken stupor, right? Okay, and if you look through the Tanakh, tardema is a deep sleep. Yeah.
Well, didn't you say it's a deep sleep from drunkenness?
It is a deep sleep from drunkenness, which is not blackout drunk. Blackout is you actually black out.
Is passing out.
Passing out is not, okay. It's not alcohol poisoning. All right. The rush also just brings down the halacha as stated in the Gemara, and the Tur, who we, for all intents and purposes, treat as the rush, also says that. So those are the three. I chose these four sources / three because these are the sources that the Mechaber bases all the psak on, and it's not going to surprise you. How does the Mechaber paskin? You get drunk on Purim. Okay, we'll see that in a little while. Okay, group two, loosely speaking, are the people who are against the drunkenness. Okay, so the one opinion that is kind of like the head of this is Rabbeinu Ephraim, who's a student of the Rif. We don't have his writings. The Baal HaMa'or is the earliest opinion I have found who quotes him. And he basically says that the incident in the Gemara with Rabba and Rabbi Zera is meant, what happened to this? Oh, is meant to contradict or to what do you call it? To be doche Rava's halacha. Okay, so he says the Gemara says you get drunk, and the incident is brought to show that we reject that opinion and we don't paskin that way. Okay, so that is Rabbeinu Ephraim, quoted by the Baal HaMa'or. Then you have,
I've heard that interpreted as there's no, at least according to the Baal HaMa'or, there's no chiyuv to drink on Purim.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I mean. He says that the halacha is not in accordance with him, and it is not appropriate to act thusly. Okay, the Kolbo and the Orchos Chaim, who I learned yesterday are the same person, holds that it is. He says levasume does not mean to get drunk, but it means to drink a little bit more than you're accustomed to in order to increase your rejoicing and to bring joy to the poor, comfort them, and speak to their heart. Okay, but the reason why he says it can't be drunk is he says. In lecha avera, he says it's iser gamor and in lecha avera gadol mizel. He holds it's usher to get drunk. Okay, and so that's why he holds this. Yeah.
Does the Ram
We're gonna get to that also. Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. Meiri also says that the mitzvah is not to be all wild and foolish, but it's to rejoice in a way that contains enjoyment from which we arrive at love of God and gratitude for the miracles. And as for the Gemara, he quotes the Gaonim, which I assume means Rabbeinu Ephraim, who's technically not a Gaon, but he was of that era-ish. And he says that shows that halacha was rejected. And then the Ran also brings down Rabbeinu Ephraim. So those are the Mefarshim who hold that, those are four Mefarshim who hold that there is no mitzvah to get drunk, and it might even be an Avera. Okay, then you got the you got the in-betweeners. Okay, so Tosfos holds you drink to the point where you mess up the song, which we call Shoshanas Yaakov, which according to the Machzor Vitri was actually established by the Anshe Knesset Hagdola, which would mean that it's conceivable that they actually were referencing the song in the Gemara when it says you don't know the difference between them. So you get drunk to the point where you verbally make a mistake when you're trying to say the song. Okay, and it's not just that line, it's Arura Zeresh, Baruch Esther, Arum Kol Rishayim, Baruch Kol HaYehudim. Okay, there's different versions of it. The Ravia is a little bit difficult because he says that this is a mitzvah but not li'ikuv, or another way that they bring on the Rabbi's shita is that it's not a chiyuv, which is difficult because the Gemara does say mechayev inish levasume. But the way Rebbe explains it on one of the halacha shiurim, which I listened to yesterday, is that the Rabbi holds the chiyuv is to have a suda, and this is a chiyuv in the suda, but it's not a chiyuv and it's not ma'akev. Okay, that's the Ravia. The Maharil is the strangest opinion, who holds that since the gematria of Avraham and Baruch Mordechai are equal, then the mitzvah is you have to get drunk to the point where you can't do the arithmetic. Okay, so that's very strange. You know, that does not seem like a shot in the Gemara, right? And then the Abu Dirim says that there was some other song, which I imagine to be like a game where like there's one team that says Avraham and one team that says Baruch Mordechai, and you have to like shout it out and you have to like pay attention and stuff. And he says that Rav Yitzchak made a poem like this. I don't know what that is, but very similar to Tosfos, that there was a specific like practice that they were referring to that involved a verbal errors. Okay, so these are the in-between people that don't fall squarely into one category or the other. Okay,
That's
It's
like
like a game.
you get like drunk enough that you're like, slurring your words, not able to speak well, etc. But like some degree of
right,
drunkenness,
right,
but not like
yeah. Okay.
It's like a game. It's like whoever gets the song right drinks more.
maybe that's a practical system for getting you there. I mean, that would do it, right? Okay. And then again, we're not going into any achronim because I don't want to touch psak, but standard psak, Mechaber just brings down. No, I'm saying the standard. I don't want to get into the forest of all the achronim.
Okay.
But the standard psak is the Mechaber just brings down. They are obligated to. He just brings down the lashon of the Gemara, right? And the Ramah says he does a combo of the kolbo and this different take on Rambam reasoning, but not Rambam Shita. He says, you don't need to get so drunk, a little bit, drink a little bit more than you're used to. That's the kolbo, v'yishan, and sleep. And when you're asleep, then you don't know the difference between the two. Okay, but then the Achronim have a lot more debate on stuff. Okay, so the questions are like this. Okay, and I'm going to ask the questions that we focused on last night. Okay, the main question is, what's the deal with this halacha? Okay, and if you want to put this in more precise terms, is drunkenness is either usher or extremely frowned upon, right? And that is very clear. And this is especially according to the Rambam, okay, which makes the Rambam Shita even harder to understand. So he says in Hilchos Deos 5:3, anyone who becomes drunk is a sinner. When wise man drinks wine, he only drinks to aid digestion. Anyone who becomes drunk is a sinner, is disgraceful, and ruins his wisdom. And if he becomes drunk in front of ignoramuses, then he has desecrated the name of God. It is prohibited to drink even a little bit in the afternoon unless it's part of his eating, since drinking while eating to aid digestion doesn't cause drunkenness. He should only be careful about wine after the meal. In the Mor Nevuchim, we read this in Rambam Bekios. He says 3:8, as for gatherings with a view to drinking intoxicants, you should regard them as more shameful than gatherings of naked people with uncovered private parts who excrete in daylight sitting together. Okay, why? Because the explanation of this is as follows. Excreting is a necessary thing, which man cannot refrain from by any device, whatever, whereas being drunk is an act committed by a bad man in virtue of his bechira. Okay, so that's a pretty extreme terms. And then halachically, the famous halacha in Yom Tov, which I'm going to read here, when a person eats and this is Yom Tov, Shvisas Yom Tov 6:20, when a person eats and drinks and rejoices on the festival, he should not become drawn after wine, fooling around and frivolity, saying the more a person engages in this, the greater the mitzvah of simcha, which is what people say on Purim, right? Oh, simcha, right? Okay. For drunkenness, excessive fooling around, and frivolity is not simcha, but hololus v'sichlus, debauchery and idiocy. We were not commanded in debauchery and idiocy, but in simcha that contains within it avodas yotzer hakol, service of the creator of everything, as it says in Devarim, because you did not serve Hashem your God amid gladness and goodness apart when everything was abundant. From here we learned that avoda must be b'simcha. V'i efshar lavod es Hashem lo mitoch skok, lo mitoch kalos rosh, lo mitoch shikrus. It is impossible to serve Hashem in a state of skok and frivolity and drunkenness. So it's a big problem for the Rambam because the Rambam explicitly says you have to get drunk and fall asleep in drunkenness. And yet he also says drunkenness is this horrible midah and it is not simcha and it's not even avodas Hashem. And by the way, if you look, I have a whole other theory. I don't think I gave shiur on this, but a whole other theory that if you look, there's an isser for a kohen to do avoda while drunk, and then there's isser to do tefillah while drunk, and avoda shabalev. You see that drunkenness is a target accessory to avoda, right? So it's a big problem for the Rambam. Yeah.
Okay, a positive one.
Just 1 second. Pause the recording.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, because all right.
So
Because you came late. Okay, late people miss things. All right, that's the lesson. Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. Coffee is more important than coming on time. All right, and more important than my time. I get it. Okay. So that's one question. But here's the other question. Okay, and this I'm bothered by every year. Okay, why is there such polarity and diversity of shitos? Okay, as Rav Pesach has been known to say, anytime you see a machlokus with tons of shitos, you know that no one knows what they're talking about. Okay, but I've never seen a machlokus where you have one side saying it's a mitzvah and a chiyuv, and the other side saying it's an isser and a bad and the worst avera, right? and then gematria, playing games, like how does such a machloket, the machloket is, like Rebbe always said, katze ala katze. It's like from one extreme to the other, and there's so many opinions. Okay. Furthermore, and this, you could classify this under the first question, but what is the purpose of this mitzvah, this halacha? Okay. And then all the explanations sound like apologetics. Okay. Right. Like, I don't know how many explanations you've heard of drunkenness in Purim, but I've heard many things that just sound like a stretch, and even the ones that I myself have said, I always preface it by saying like, this might be drush, like it just sounds like a stretch. So what's the purpose of it? And another question is, what is the halachic address? Okay, so the Rambam is very clear about halachic address, which is that it's a halacha in Seuda, right? So at least that's something, right? But it's not 100% clear that it's in Seuda. The Gemara definitely doesn't say explicitly that it's part of Seuda. And what is the address? Okay, we had 5 questions. What was the 5th one last night? Whatever. All right, we'll think about the question. Oh, I think we said. I think okay. This is another variant here. Is like, what is the origin of this halacha? Right. It's very strange that Rava is really the first person to mention this. Not that that's an intrinsic question, but there's no Mishnah in Megillah about this. And Rava is fairly late, and for these Rishonim and Achronim to have all these debates, it's a very late thing. It's just very, very strange, Okay, fine.
What, that we get drunk on Purim?
Yeah. Yes.
Within the wider set polarity in the verse here, you also want to take up within certain people themselves. Say that with the Rambam, how he had in general, it's really you shouldn't be getting drunk. Then
yeah, that's part of that. I'm counting under this question about I'll put this here, and specifically, how can we make sense of the Rambam? Okay, which seems to be contradictory to his own positions. Yeah.
Did we read another thing the other day in the Rambam also about drunkenness? I don't know where it was.
There's one in Tefillah that we have yet to read, and then there's a Gemara about the delayed drunkenness. Is that what you're thinking of the Yad Pshuta?
I was thinking about the one where he slams it even more than the ones that we just read.
Oh yeah, I don't remember a different one. It's possible. I think we covered it, but yeah.
Question number 5. How do we answer that? How do we answer that question? I'm not understanding the question.
So most D'Rabbanans, we don't have a clear history about when and why they were instituted. It's part of just regular Torah Sheba'al Peh. Like sometimes you get a reason given, but here all the halachos, we know exactly what year, or not exactly what year. We know ballpark what year all these mitzvahs were introduced, and they're all presumably from the Megillah, right? Like they should be in the Megillah. So we need to see what the origin of this is in the Psukim, because all of the halachos are in the Psukim. Okay, so now we're ready for. Yes.
Are you also taking into account anything of how we look at this halacha in regards to the whole rest of the day?
Yeah. How does this fit into the rest of the day? Okay, and that's part of my halachic address question. Yeah, how does it fit into the system? Okay, or system. Yeah. Okay. So here we go with my radical. Okay, again, the title this year is my current radical view on the mitzvah to get drunk on Purim. So I'm going to say this in one sentence. Okay. The radical answer is Purim is not a Jewish celebration. Okay, so let's go from the top. Okay, so with Hanukkah, the events happened, and the next year the Rabbanan set up the institutions of Hanukkah, and according to the Rav, Ner Hanukkah wasn't established until later on, but plain shot in the Gemara is they set up Al Hanisim and Halal. Okay, right? But how did the celebrations of Purim come about? So if you look at the Psukim in Esther chapter 9. Okay, it says that it says like this: the Judeans that were in Shushan gathered on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and they killed 300 men in Shushan, but they did not send forth their hand on the spoils. And the rest of the Judeans that were in the king's provinces gathered to stand up for their lives and to find rest for their enemies, killing 75,000 of those who hated them, but they did not send forth their hand on the spoils. On the 13th day of the month of Adar, they rested on the 14th and made it a day of Mishteh, which we're going to see in a second means drinking party, and simcha and happiness or rejoicing. Okay.
The pasuk about Yaakov is the same lashon Mishnah,
right? By Yaakov, that sounds familiar.
When he got married, and he couldn't.
Oh yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Okay, interesting. All right. So this is the first mention of any celebration, right? Now, whose idea is this celebration?
peoples.
The peoples, right? This was a spontaneous celebration when they rested from their enemies. Okay, that's outside of Shushan. Then in Pasuk 18, and the Jews that were in Shushan gathered on the 13th and the 14th, and they rested on the 15th and made it a day of drinking party, mishteh, and simcha. Okay, and whose idea was that?
The Jews and
Jews in Shushan. Okay. Then you have, therefore, the Judean villagers who dwell in unwalled towns make the 14th of the month of Adar a day of simcha and mishteh and yom tov, and sending gifts to one another, to one friend to another. Okay, so that also is describing what happened. Okay, but when was this instituted? Okay, well, it's ambiguous because it's they make. Okay, but it was not instituted for the Jewish people until here. Pasuk 20. Mordechai wrote these things and he sent letters to all the Judeans who were throughout the provinces of King Ahasuerus near and far to establish for themselves to observe the 14th of the month of Adar and the 15th every year as the days which the Judeans had rested from their enemies and the month which had turned from grief to sorrow and from mourning to celebration, to make them days of mishteh and simcha, of sending portions one to another and gifts to the poor. Okay, and that is the form of Megillah, of Purim that we have today. Okay, now, those are the psukim, okay? First of all, let's just clarify the term mishteh, which, by the way, whenever you want to see if linguistically something is a theme in any sefer, then using the concordancia graph feature in all Torah is a good way to do it. So the term mishteh appears 46 times in Tanakh. Do you notice any patterns here? Okay, in Megillas Esther, it is used 20 times, and elsewhere in Tanakh, it is used 26 times, okay? So that doesn't prove anything, but it does prove that mishteh is talked a lot about in Megillas Esther. Mishteh means drinking party because it's from Shasa, okay? Drinking occasion and drinking bout. First person in Torah who makes a mishteh is Abraham when he's serving his guests. It says, Avayas lam mishteh. Sforno, Shadal, and Rav David Zvi Hoffman all explain the lashon is kvius suda al hayayin. That's the Sforno. Shadal says it's not a suda, it's just a wine snack. Is because they didn't eat their suda at that time. Rav David Zvi Hoffman also says it's a beverage. It's based on the beverages. Okay, so mishteh is a drinking party. Okay, and that's where it's mentioned in the Megillah. Okay. But now let me show you, I mentioned that all of these are traditional sources except for one. Okay, and those who were here, I don't know if you were here for this, Rav Reggio. Okay, so Rav Reggio is our non-traditional source. Okay, Rav Reggio, brief history, was an older contemporary of Shadal, part of the Italian Austrian group, who, like Shadal and his buddies, does not fit squarely into any derech halimud, right? They have their own derech halimud. So they're very anti-rationalist philosophy, but they're also very anti-Kabbalah and mysticism. Okay, they are traditional in terms of relying on our sources, but they're very, very open in terms of relying on academic sources. But they were not part of the whole reform, movement in the same way as like the Jews in Germany, right? But they did make recourse to these things. Rav Reggio wrote a commentary on the Megillah, which is very controversial. The controversial thing is that his basic shita is that he does a radical pshat interpretation in the Megillah where he says, what happens if we read the Megillah only based on the text and on other historical contemporary sources? Okay, and he argues that Megillah was the only book of Tanakh written for that purpose, because it says at the end of the Megillah that this was distributed throughout all of the kingdom and is recorded in the chronicles of Pras and Madai. Okay, and so he says like it should be able to stand on its own. All right. So what's radical about that? Not just the approach, but the conclusion is he concludes that Esther was a tzaddikus and was a chachama. That's fine, and Mordechai was an ignoramus, non-religious Jew who made lots of bad decisions.
I've heard of that opinion, and I've been trying to find the source.
Okay, so it's Rav Reggio. I believe he's the first one to say this.
Okay.
And it's an interesting exercise if you go, and I gave a shiur on this, which you could listen to, where I go through his arguments. They're very strong questions that he has. We're going to go through one of them, okay? Very strong questions, and we are so prejudiced, rightly so, to regard Mordechai as a tzaddik because that's our Masorah, right? But if you just look at the psukim, you don't get that picture, okay? Just like if you look at the Shvatim in Sefer Bereshis, you don't get the picture that they were tzaddikim, So it's a different premise here, yeah.
Just to be clear though, we are going to say Mordechai was not an ignoramus.
I'm not going to say that Mordechai is an ignoramus, but
he's just very also from Chazal.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know, like the fact he was like on object just like it all,
right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, but here's the thing: is the reason why we're bringing this in is this is where I got the idea. Okay, so we're going to read his commentary on those psukim in Perek 9. and I am going to either. I don't think you need to accept his perush in order to say the theory that I'm going to say to answer all of our questions. But I think that he has a compelling argument, which does not force you to accept. In fact, he's Melamed Zechus on Mordechai here, but he's going to come out really strong against Mordechai at first, and they're good questions on Mordechai. Okay, and then I'm going to propose my own theory, which I think you can go without him. Okay.
So like Bashita holds that Mordechai was actually stupid.
Yeah, foolish,
I
yeah.
think he says without looking at Chazal. He says.
Yes, I mean, I'm not going to go so strong as to say it seems like he actually hates Mordechai. Like I think he takes it too far. I think some of his arguments are very good, but some of his arguments sound like he's forcing the Shita in. You know, that's my assessment of
So
it.
he's ignoring Chazal in this respect.
Yeah, but that's not new. The Rashbam also ignored Chazal. The Ibn Ezra also ignored Chazal. And this is part of the school of radical pshat, where you just take the thing without any midrashim. And again, like if you look at Reuven and the Ma'aser Reuven and Bilhah, I give a whole Sunday share on this. Then it sounds like he had bia with Bilhah, right? Okay. But if you look at the midrashim, then chas v'shalom to say that. So this is a whole thing in radical pshat. But
so just a contrast, just have it back from what does he hold about Achashverosh?
I'm not going to get into that. We'll stay on target here. Okay. So we're going to read through this. I want to read through the whole commentary. Okay, on these pesukim and appreciate the questions here. They're very strong questions. So after the sorrow changed to rejoicing and the mourning changed to Yom Tov, Shalach Mordechai l'sfarim al kol haYehudim. Mordechai sent books to all the Jews. V'tziva lasos Purim b'chol shana v'shana. He commanded them to do Purim every year. Ach mi lo yispale liros. Who would not be astonished to see Shelo or Osam afilu b'dibur echad lasei shavach v'hoda'a le'elokei Yisrael asher pada Osam mireda shachas. Mordechai did not say one thing about giving thanks and praise to God on being redeemed. Okay. He did not command them to sing Hallel. Okay. And he doesn't mention this, but you know what else is missing from the description of what Mordechai enacted? What mitzvah is missing here? Besides Hallel. No, we have Mishteh. What's the central mitzvah of Purim? Kriyas HaMegillah. Nowhere in the Megillah does it say that you have to read the Megillah. Okay, so he doesn't point that out. And yeah, I know Chazal darshan it as Nizkarim B'Na'asin, but it doesn't. Plain pshat, Mordechai never required them to read the Megillah or to engage in the limit of the Megillah or anything like that. Okay, so I'm going to add that to the question.
Was that the reason why he went to the Anshe Knesset?
Where does he went to Anshe Knesset in the Megillah? Oh, Gemara. You're bringing Gemara. Okay, fine. So you're not taking Rav Reggio's derech, who we're learning right now. Okay, I see. Yeah, right. That's why I give this whole preface on Rav Reggio.
I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah. Okay, you have to read the guy in terms of his own premises here. Okay.
I'm just even within his premise. Why does the Megillah have to say everything?
Because the Megillah is saying what Mordechai commanded all the Jews to do. Yeah.
But commanding all the Jews to do something doesn't mean he has the authority to do everything. He's just
but
one
why does it say he commanded the Jews to do Mishnah Simcha Yom Tov and Kriyas Megillah and
maybe he didn't have the authority to command the entire.
He was second in command to the king. He had all the authority short of the king.
Well, first of all, there's being second command of the king. That's one thing, and then there's another system of halacha where you can't just be command everyone to do something.
But he did not command them to do Megillah. Okay, all right. We don't have time to go into trying to reconcile the Gemara with a Mefarish who is Davka not.
Even without the Gemara, I don't think you could. Even within his framework, I don't.
The Megillah doesn't say that you read the Megillah. Okay, that's a fact. Okay,
that's a fact.
Okay, fine. All right, let's go on. Okay, this is an abbreviated version of the shiur, and I think that is. I think it's a bad question. Okay, I think it's a bad question.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Anyways, but he doesn't say the question anyway. So he says they did not say to say halal. Okay. Ella kasher be'istar lo ziras osam lisa levavam. Sorry, kasher be'istar lo ziras osam lisa levavam el kel. El Kapayim El Kel B'Shamayim, just as Mordechai at the time of the Estara did not tell the Jews to daven. That's another one of his questions on Mordechai. If you look at the Megillah, what happens? Mordechai hears about the decree. He puts on sackcloth and starts crying. He does not tell any other Jews to daven or to fast. Esther tells all the other Jews to fast, and he learns that Esther did the right thing and Mordechai did the wrong thing. Okay, that's his limud. Okay, so Rav Reggio says, just as Mordechai didn't tell his fellow Jews at Estar to call out to God, Kinata, so too now, Ki Haisa Haravacha, when there was a relief, Shachach kel Moshian. He forgot about the God who saved them. V'lo zachar lahodos l'Hashem v'chastov nivlosav. And he didn't mention to give thanks to God. V'zeh davar tema. This is astonishing. And not only that, v'im haya az mizbeach banoi b'Yushalayim. The mizbeach was in Yerushalayim already built. Kamoshalo yimalet l'chol adeos heyos hamaora de Esther shanim rabos achar koresh melech paras asher betchilos malchuso nivde hamizbeach. So he says, according to all the opinions of chronology, and he goes into a lot of chronology, the Mizbeach was already built in Yerushalayim because Koresh started the binyan by Sheni, and then it was stopped, and then the Megillas Esther happens, and then they go back afterwards. And I'm going to send a timeline, by the way, which I found in my book. If lo Allah alibo lahakri sham korbanos toda ba'ado uvad kol kahal Yisrael agodo hatova asher gamalam hakel yisbarach shlo nastam teraf l'shnei oivehem. Why didn't Mordechai send a thing to the Jews in Yerushalayim to be makri korbanos of toda, which is what we do when we have the Mizbeach? None of that. Okay, and he clearly had the ability to send letters everywhere. Okay. Ha'im rak bazeh, listen to this sharp, Ha'im rak bazeh yishalmu b'nei Yisrael chovasam lifnei go'olam yisbarach. Is this how the Jews repay their debt to their Redeemer, to God? B'mali kresam basar v'yain u'bishluach manos ish l'reyehu, by filling their bellies with meat and wine and sending presents to their friends? Okay. Kasher kiyam alehem Mordechai Yehudi b'yamim hahem v'kasher nispachet minhag ap b'yamim ha'eleh. Okay. Now, if you take a step back, again, this is part of our question. The way we celebrate Purim is not a Jewish celebration. When do we have mishtat? Never, right? When do we have a mitzvah of sending presents to our friends? Never. In fact, the only other time that Mishloach Manos is mentioned, which we did in Rambam B'Kiyos, is in Sefer Nehemiah. Sefer Nehemiah and Ezra say on Rosh Hashanah, send be mishalech manos, but there's a key phrase, le'ein lo, to those who don't have anything, and that is mitzvah of tzedakah as part of the mitzvah of Yom Tov. We never have a thing of sending gifts to your friends, and we know that it's dafka sending gifts to your friends because the pasuk specifies umatanos le'avyonim, right? Okay, fine. Okay.
Well,
and each l'rei, right? That's this plain trousers, that's your friend. Okay, so that's his question: is why didn't Mordechai institute this Jewish celebration and say give thanks to God? Powerful question. And even if you don't accept his answer, you got to recognize the question. Okay, so here's his answer. Oh, sorry. No, furthermore, second question. So regarding everything Mordechai wrote to celebrate this year after year, yesh lishol, you got to ask, why did Mordechai feel that it was so important to make this an eternal celebration? Okay. He says that the days of Purim will not pass from the Jews and the memory will not be ceased from their offspring. Couldn't he have just made a simcha that year? If you'll say, he tova gedolo af lebanim v'levanei banim kamosh anu chogim zichron yitzias mitzrayim le'ol me'ad v'omrim lo es avosenu gal bilvad gal hakadosh baruch hu ela afosanu. Maybe you'll say that just like we recall Yitzias Mitzrayim every year because God redeeming them is God redeeming us. So maybe that's why he did it. Hine zehu emes b'bechinas godol chasti hakel shagam alamo. That makes sense if you're talking about the chesed that God gives to his nation. Then there's no end to the amount of praise that we give God, and we have to do it every year. But to eat and drink and send gifts, that he wants to make for generations. Therefore, if Mordechai had instituted that we sing to God and give thanks to him on the redemption of our souls, then it would be fitting to make Purim an annual thing for all generations. There's no limit. But since Mordechai didn't even tell the Jews to do this, he just made them rejoice and eat and drink. It should have just been that generation. What reason is there for the simcha of the banim? Okay, so that's the second question. Why instituted for all generations? Now, you thought this was the controversial source. Okay, his answer is going to come from an even more non-traditional source. Okay, I'll review the source. Have you ever heard of the appendix to the book of Esther?
I don't think so.
Okay, so you know what Apocrypha is, right? Okay, so what's probably the most famous Apocrypha that we do actually reference?
Book of Maccabees.
Book of Maccabees, right? So what do we hold about the book of Maccabees?
No, I like it on Pablo if you read it. No. I don't know actually.
Anyone know? So
Did it get canonized?
yeah, it didn't get canonized, right? So what do we hold though about like
True.
it's the events that are stated in there?
True.
They're true, right? They were written at the time. I forgot who wrote the book of Maccabees, So I actually,
We hold it's true.
I mean, I think we rely on it like any other historical document, and there's all the stuff that we know about the Hashmonaim, I think comes from that and Josephus, it's no different than any other historical account that was written during that time, as far as I
So
know.
is it different than other apocrypha?
No, I don't think so.
So like not that.
Oh, sorry. No, sorry. This is historical apocrypha. There's apocrypha that's like, philosophy and ethics and stuff like that. That might have a different status.
Because not that I can understand what the
Yeah.
Rambam says when he says it. But
Yeah.
when he says you don't have a chayk on Pablo if you read apocrypha, like
I don't want to complicate us
okay,
with
okay,
some other
okay.
sheet that I don't even know. Okay.
Okay.
I know where the Rambam talks about that. But this was in my prequel meme. Sequel meme. Corporate needs you to find the difference in legitimacy between these apocrypha and these apocrypha. Addition to the book of Esther and Star Wars episodes 7, 8, and 9. They're the same legitimacy. Okay, I don't hold by the sequels. Okay, but here are some ksuvim. There's the Divrei Eov, Esdras, Psalm 151, Psalm 152 to 155. Additions to the book of Esther, Hosafos the Megillas Esther. Additions to Daniel, prayer of Menashe. Okay, so these are apocrypha. So that's where his answer is going to be based on. So he says like this. He says, Omnam tzarich ladas ki lo haYehudim bilvad kavu az lazos Purim. It was not just the Jews who established the holiday of Purim. Okay. Elagam kol am pras umadai hayoshvim tachas memshelas Achashverosh. All the people who were under Achashverosh's rule, hayu osim mishte v'simcha biyomahu b'chol shana v'shana, celebrated that day every year with mishte and simcha. Okay. The king enacted that they celebrate this every day, every year. I mean, okay, why? We find this in the additions to Megillas Esther that is in the Apocrypha of the Nations, and in the Scripture of the Nations. This is something we find in one of their books that is in addition to the 24 books of Tanakh. We distance ourselves from attaching those books to Tanakh. We hold that only the 24 books of Tanakh were written with the Ruach HaKodesh. On the narratives in those books, it's fit to rely on like any other true thing. Okay. So that's I don't know what he means by nahagu chesed mechanka al pihem, but whatever, relying on the books of the Chashmonaim, and that's also where the term Festival of Lights comes from, right? I think it's either the Sefer Machamim or Josephus. Okay, so the Sof Esther Kasuv Sham bePerek Yud Vav. Okay, our Esther only goes to Perek Yud. Okay, but in their appendix, right, it says. So here's Pashegan Ksav Hadas Asher Nasan HaMelech Lehodia Lechol Ha'amim Ki Haman. Oh, so the king issued a copy of a letter to all the people, Ki Haman Bagad Bo, to say that Haman rebelled against the king, betrayed the king. And he wrote a letter to all the people saying that I killed Haman in line with justice. V'tachlis Devar Sham Hukach. So here's a pasuk from Megillah Perek Yud Vav pasuk Chaf Beis. Okay, quote. So this is what it says in the letter that Achashverosh sent to everybody. Lachain, therefore, afatem, you too, meaning all the non-Jews in the Malchus Achashverosh, tasimu hayom hazeh ben shar yemei chagenu, make this day, add it to the rest of our holidays. V'tachogu oso b'chol minei simcha, and celebrate it with all types of simcha. Leba'abur yodea ledor achron, so that the generations will know. That anyone who keeps the laws of Persia, of the kings of Persia, Yikabel Sachar al Emunaso, will have reward for his faithfulness. And anyone who opposes the king will meet his demise. Okay. makes a lot of sense, right? That this was an attempted coup by Haman against Achashverosh, and he wanted to reassert his malchus by spreading a message of what happened and making it clear that this is the case. So, I mean, this makes sense from like a monarchical perspective. End quote. Hine. Now here's his answer and his defense of Mordechai. Okay, limud zechus of Mordechai, even in his framework. Hine al pi advarim ha'ela nachon lachshav ki lios zeh hayom kavua b'chol hamalchus liyom chag v'simcha. Since this holiday was instituted for the entire malchus as a chag v'simcha, lo haya yashar be'enei Mordechai she'i hayehudi levado im heyoso bal hadavar mishtana mikol ha'am bayomahu levioti hisras bo simech v'tov lev. Mordechai did not think it was proper for the Jew alone, even though he was involved in the matter, to differentiate themselves from the other nations in the way that they demonstrate their simcha and tov lev. Therefore, in order to resemble the rest of the people, he established the days of Purim in each and every year. So in other words, and he says, maybe that's why he was not gozer to make praises of God into a part of the holiday. It was enough to celebrate the way that the Persians celebrated. Okay, so to summarize, okay, and I'm going to write the summary out just in a brief sentence here. Okay, Purim is not a Jewish celebration. Okay, rather, according to Rav Reggio, okay, Achashverosh instituted, or really tasked Mordechai with instituting a celebration annually for all Persians, okay, to reinforce his malchus, okay, sorry, it always happens. I'll just do it in English. His monarchy, okay, and that is why, and because Mordechai didn't want to differentiate the Jews, which, by the way, why was that a wise political move?
Because the whole thing was
because they were
yeah, yesh am mefuzar umufurad b'hamim v'daseim shonos mikol am, right? So he wants to, you don't just make the Jews all different, and to differentiate the Jews from the other nations, he instituted a secular Persian holiday. Okay. So that's Rav Reggio's theory. Now here's my alternative theory, okay, which I don't think you have to say this, okay. If you just read the psukim and you don't have any of this stuff, the celebrations emerged from the people. Now, what state were the Jews in terms of their observance of halacha during this time period? Very bad. Okay, how bad? Bad to the point where when Ezra brought them back, he had to get the Kohanim to divorce their non-Jewish wives. And the people forgot about Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot, right? We're talking really bad. So, but the Jews are naturally going to celebrate when they got relief from their enemies. And how are they going to celebrate? Like Persians, okay? And once they celebrated and they kept on doing this, now you as Mordechai, and we're going to now bring in righteous Mordechai and righteous Esther, okay, with the Torah Peh framework. What are you going to do when the people are celebrating this way? Okay, now, you could choose to stamp it out and reinstitute Jewish stuff, or what would be the other option? Channel it towards good stuff. Okay, so what I contend that they did, if you don't accept Rav Reggio's theory, is that Mordechai and Esther took the way that the people had been celebrating, which was Persian in character, and halachified it and infused it with Torah values. Okay, but it originated with Persian celebration, and that's why it is a non-Jewish character. Okay, so I'm just going to type that out in a sentence here. Or the celebration originated with the heavily assimilated Persian Jews, and Mordechai and Esther took those celebrations, halachified them, and infused them with Torah values. Now, how does this answer our questions? So I think this answers all of our questions. Okay, what's the deal with this halacha? Okay, and why is there such polarity and diversity? And what's the purpose? And what's the origin? And what's the address? So really what I'm contending is as follows, that unlike other derabbanans, which were instituted by the rabbanan for specific purposes, this is much more like modern day minhagim, right? Not minhagim instituted by the Sanhedrin, but modern day minhagim that arose from the people, that once they took hold, then it was incumbent upon the Chachmei Hador to keep them within halachic frameworks and to regulate them and to come up with post facto explanations for how this is in line with Torah values. Okay, so for example, Mishloach Manos Ish L'Re'ehu probably was just in the same way that like people give gifts on their holidays, right? But the Chachamim framed it in terms of Simchas Hayom and promoting Ahava and Achava and all that stuff. Okay, Matanos Levionim. What secular reason would you give for why Mordechai or Achashverosh might have wanted Matanos Levionim?
Economics.
That could be good. Okay, but in terms of the line of strengthening the monarchy, Reggio's theory at least.
I mean, it shows character. I mean,
Okay, that is definitely good. That's definitely
I
good.
guess it's support of the masses that like you're caring for everyone in the population.
Okay, that you're being too Jewish.
I mean, if everybody else is doing it, then the king doesn't have to do it.
Okay, practical reason. The more people celebrate this, the better. The king wants to make sure that everyone can observe this holiday. Okay, right? So if you've got a bunch of poor people in the thing, you got to equip them with that, with the ability to do that. You could also say what you're saying. For example, I think the modern day example of what you guys are saying is homeless shelters providing Christmas dinners and Thanksgiving dinners for the poor. You know, of like helping them become part of the celebration. But what did the Chachmei Yisrael do with Matanos Levionim? How do they frame it? Tzedakah, right? Tzedakah, they frame it with all the things of Yom Tov and Midama B'Shechina and all that stuff, okay? And same thing with the Simcha and the Mishteh, all right? So what did they do? So this is where you see in, I'm going to use the example of the Rambam here, that what did the Rambam do? So people were probably having wild drinking parties, okay? And that was something that Chachmei Yisrael had to contend with, all right? So the Rambam, I think, has a really good, solution, which is, how does the Rambam define shikr? Shikr in Hilchos Tefillah is you cannot speak in the presence of a king, and shasui is you just feel the alcohol, right? Those are the two standards. Now, shikr is a very low bar, right? Speaking in front of the king means that everything about your speech is as perfect as like your highest caliber speaking. So if you're slurring your words, if you're hesitating, if you're, not thinking through your words, you're already shikr, okay? So the Rambam mandated that in the context of a Sudas Mitzvah, okay, which is a halakhic institution, which is at the end of the day, after you've done the Kriyas Megillah and all these other mitzvos, you get to the point of shikr, which is very low bar, and then before you get to hololus v'sichlus and all the defecating in public that he condemns, you go to sleep in your shikrus. So Rambam is taking this thing which in its original form could have been very wild and unrestrained, and he's giving the most narrow halachic parameters, which still meets the criterion of the Tzuras Mitzvah as was instituted by Chazal. Yes.
It sounds slightly like the Ramah, though, that you drink and then you go to sleep.
So I think the reason why the Rambam would be against that, far from me to get into the Rambam's head, but like it was a mishteh, and the Megillah says mishteh, and mishteh is a drinking party with drunkenness.
Is there any way that you just explain the Rambam?
Yeah.
As drinking till you're shasoi?
To your shikr.
To your shikr.
To your shikr,
and
yeah.
You say go to sleep.
Right, as opposed to the Ramah, who doesn't say, quoting the Kolbo, is not like necessarily shikr. I mean, the Ramah says, mishtakar kol kach,
I mean, shikr is what, revius?
Different people have different tolerances,
No, revius is nothing.
Well, revius is shasoi, at least. We treat revius as
You're
shasoi.
not able to be almost in mellow.
No, we don't say that. I don't think. No, at least the Ram doesn't say that. The Ram says, in fact, he even says that with shasui, once you've consumed a revius of wine, you shouldn't daven until you remove the wine from your system. That's not shikr, though.
Well, that's the revius.
That's for shasui.
Shikr is like you can't walk back home.
But the revius is.
Let's read the
what I
halacha.
said is that the revius is when you shouldn't.
Let's read the halacha. Shikr ayis palo mipnei she'en lo kavana. V'im yispalo tfilas ha'toeva. Lefika chozer mispalo kishi yisrona mishikrusa. Shasui ayis palo v'im yispalo tfilas ha'tfila. Ezu shikr is zeh she'eno yachol ledaber b'fnei hamelech. V'shasui she'yachol ledaber b'fnei hamelech v'eno mishtabish. V'afal pichein. So even though you are shasui and you can speak in front of a king, hoil v'shasu revius yain, since you drank a revius of yain, lo yispal ad she'yasu yenim yalav. That's all in shasui.
That was what I was saying. Is that you're not supposed to daven if you drink in revius?
Yeah, but that's not shikr though.
Okay, and he said
Shikr is more than
and he's
rupees.
saying by Purim to get shikr.
Purim to get shikr. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the difference. Yeah. Now you can give all sorts of. So I think this explains also why all of the explanations are apologetics, because they are. Okay, and I'll give here's my favorite reason for why we why we do this, and to me this is the kavana. Is the Abu Dirim says it like this: Vim Tomar he'achivu chachamim lehishtaker b'Purim v'lo. How can the chachamim have obligated them to get drunk on Purim? V'halo b'kama makomos b'Torah maskir shu michshol gadol hashikrus kamo noach v'lot. Right, the Torah is against drunkenness. V'yesh lomar. We can say all the miracles came about for Israel in the days of Achashverosh through Mishteh. So Vashti was nixed from her malchus because of wine. Mishteh yain. Shnemar bayom hashvi ketov lev hamelch bayain. Amar lahavi es Vashti b'gomer. Uba Esther tachteha al yedei Mishteh. Esther replaced her through Mishteh. Shnemar vayas hamelch Mishteh gadol l'chol sarav v'abadav as Mishteh Esther. Right, that was the coronation of Esther. V'chein inyan Haman umapalasa al yedei Mishteh hayayin haya. And Esther's two Mishtehs for Haman is what brought about the downfall. V'lechein chivu lehishtaker b'Purim mitnei sheba hanes ba'avur Mishteh hayayin. We become drunk on Purim because the nace came about through the Mishteh Hayayin, Sha'asa Esther, the Atayih Nizkar Hanes Hagadol B'Shasiyas Hayayin, and now the nace will come about, a memory of the nace will come about through Shasiyas Hayayin. So unlike the Rambam, who seems to file this under Su'uda, the Abu Dirim files this under Pirsumei Nisa. Okay, that publicizing the miracle, and I think if you go one step further, that I've heard Rav Pesach say is we are reenacting the victory celebration that they had back then. And I think this fits into what Rebbe has explained by Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, that you see that in Sipur, there's two modes of Sipur. There's Sipur al Yidei Dibur V'Limud, and then Sipur al Yidei demonstration of the Heseva and the Arba Kosos. So to here, you have the Sipur, you have the Pirsumei Nisa al Yidei Limud and Kriyas Megillah, and then you have the Pirsumei Nisa al Yidei demonstration of the Mishteh and putting it in that framework. And then you also have the Kolbo, who I read earlier, but I'm going to read it again now that we know that this is a post facto thing, that he says in the Kolbo that, where is it? He says, a person is obligated levasumi on Purim not to get drunk because drunkenness is a complete prohibition, and there's no transgression greater than this, for it causes prohibited sexual relations, murder, and many other transgressions. Rather, one should drink a little bit more than he is accustomed in order to increase his rejoicing and to bring joy to the poor, comfort them, and speak to their heart, for this is the complete joy. So he files it under Matanos Levyonim, and as a means of Nechamas Ha'evyon, which we see from Rambam Megillah 2:17, is the greatest simcha. And you can see how this would work, right? Is that alcohol lowers inhibitions. When inhibitions are lowered, then you see people in far away dancing all the time with random strangers. You're going to be able to do that with the poor. And not only that, I bet the poor also appreciate this, that they're being treated like real people. It's not just like, so you can do your mitzvah. It's like to actually bring joy to the poor. Okay. Now, so I think that is the answer to all of our questions, but I'm going to end with one piece of social commentary. Okay. Which is that one of the reasons given why we don't say Hallel on Purim, so the Gemara says one reason is Kriya Zo Hilela, that the Kriyas Megillah is the Hallel, and the Rambam paskins that way. But Rava says it's because Akati Avdi Achashverosh Havu, right, Anan, that unlike on Pesach, where we can say Hallelu Avdei Hashem because we're no longer Avdei Paro, we can't say Hallelu Avdei Hashem because we're still the servants of Achashverosh. So there is and then Megillah ends on a sad note, right? Of Achashverosh imposed taxes on everybody, right? Which is still the what do you call it? The shibud, right? So I think there's pasuk in the Gemara Megillah, not Megillah, in Tehillim, Kuvav Lamed Hey, Vayisarvu v'goyim v'yomadu v'naseim. They assimilated with the non-Jews and learned their actions. Okay, now that's not referring to Purim, but this is a reality. Okay, here's what I think happens: is that in a certain sense, the drinking on Purim is a litmus test. Okay, are you going to drink like a Jew, which is in terms of the framework of Simchas Hayom and the 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 halakhic parameters and not losing control and not gaining doing averos and stuff, and doing what the Meiri says, which I think the Meiri is the most beautiful description of the type of simcha that we should have on Purim, which I'm just going to read this as the last source for today. You should be abundant in simcha on this day in Ichil and Shasiya till you're not lacking anything. We're not commanded to become drunk and to degrade ourselves. From the simcha. We're not commanded on a simcha of wildness and foolishness. It should bring us to Avas Hashem and the miracles and Hodah for the nisim that God did. Okay, so that's drinking like a Jew. Or are you going to drink like a Persian or like an American? Which is basically like losing control and having all of that stuff. So I think it does function based on my claim that this emerged from an assimilated Jewish society. I think this is a way to have a litmus test for yourself to see to what extent are you akati adai avdei Achashverosh, and to what extent are you actually like fulfilling the goal of the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah of channeling this in the correct direction. So that's my radical theory about Purim drinking.
Are you able to share these sources?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks. I know we went over time.